A while back, I needed to get my driver's license renewed. Yes, that was great. And a part of that process required an eye exam, where one places their face into this small, dark metal viewfinder, sort of like this. On the display are 3 columns. The first 2 have 3 letters running down each side, and the last column is empty, and you are told to read what you see. So I read what I saw: BZTHGU. To which the DMV attendant then said, "Now read the letters on the right." So at first I laughed because I knew this was a trick question. There were no letters on the right. But she didn't laugh. I don't think they laugh a lot at the DMV, and she did not laugh. She just repeated, "Read the letters on the right." I remained baffled. Clearly annoyed now, she said, "Lady, are both of your eyes open?" At which point I realized I had inadvertently closed my left eye. Sure enough, when I opened it, 3 more letters magically appeared in the column on the right. I read the last 3 letters successfully, and boom, license renewed. This ability to see the world through 2 eyes, called binocular vision, is a phenomenon unique to humans and other animals that reside higher up on the food chain. Because our eyes are positioned in the front of our heads, our 2 eyes work together to see the world around us. Other animals that reside lower on the food chain possess monocular vision, with eyes on either side of their heads. For them, there is little to no overlap between the visual fields of their 2 eyes, so they can never get a full picture of their surroundings. Having binocular vision gives us much better depth perception, the ability to perceive our world in 3 dimensions. It places us on the fitter side of the Darwinian scale because we have fuller, deeper perception of our world, something that nature understands as a keen advantage. But despite this, most of us in the modern world seem to see this differently, because as you have likely already observed about this modern moment in which we live, we are living through notably one-eyed times. Earlier this year, I read a really eye-opening article about this exact phenomenon. And I implore you to listen to the following quote in its entirety in order to understand its full meaning. The article opened as follows, quote, "We live in 2 Americas. In one America, a mentally unstable president lies daily and stirs up bigotry that tears our social fabric. In another America, a can-do president tries hard to make America great again, as lying journalists stir up hatred that tears our social fabric. The one thing we all agree on, our social fabric is torn. In each America, people who inhabit the other are often perceived as not just obtuse, but also dangerous. Half of Democrats and Republicans alike say in polls that they are literally afraid of the other political party." End quote. Can you see it now? U.S. currency will not depict one, but rather two great eagles vying for space on each side with the motto E pluribus duo across each one, the one on the left in blue, the one on the right in red. But make no mistake, the dividing line between these two Americas isn't that easily delineated. It's complicated, and it is haphazard. It's running through our neighborhoods, our schools. It's even running through this sanctuary right now. For many of us, it runs through our most personal spaces too, through our homes, through our dinner tables. The augers of these extensive lines have bored through the core of nearly every one of our central communal structures. They've created an extensive network of fissures, with the structures themselves beginning to crumble and fall apart as a result. Consider the big picture of higher education in America today. In high schools and universities across our country, so-called safe space creates cover for the silencing of diverse and conflicting opinion. Microaggressions and trigger warnings have paralyzed the complicated and messy conversations that always proved necessary for nuanced and eye-opening learning. Or let's get more personal. In what has sadly become one of the most divisive topics for the American Jewish people, Israel. The following presents an honest picture of this complex situation. About a year ago, I spoke with an older man who recounted his personal experience in watching the birth of the modern state of Israel in 1948 and the miracles of the Six-Day War. Had it not been for Israel, he said, our history might very well have ended at the conclusion of World War II. He spoke of his own daily experiences with anti-Semitism growing up in Chicago, where, from the age of 6, he was beaten up every day on his walk to school, kicked in the stomach while being called a dirty Jew. He knows that Israel was and will remain so very important, not only because of history, but also because history always repeats. And as a Jewish people, we cannot afford to do anything but offer our unwavering support for our Jewish homeland. As such, he was deeply upset when his college-age grandson shared that although he too supports Israel and calls himself a Zionist, he also feels it is important to voice his criticism of some of the policies of the Israeli government and what he called Israel's mistreatment of Palestinians and Israeli Arabs. This man was utterly devastated and disappointed, embarrassed, and angry. He was angry that his grandson had betrayed not only Israel in his mind, not only our people in his mind, but his very own grandfather. And he had told him so. At which point his grandson accused his grandfather of abdicating his moral responsibilities as a Jew, the ones that his grandfather had taught him. He questioned how his grandfather could just ignore what he perceived as 50% of the story and look the other way at injustices being perpetrated in the name of the Jewish people. This was their conversation, and it ended with slammed doors after a pronouncement that, until the other came around, there was nothing more that needed to be spoken between the two of them. So many of you have shared with me and with my clergy partners similar stories of the rupturing of your families and your friendships as a result of these one-eyed understandings. Some of you have shared that when you hear about who someone, a community member, a friend, even a family member voted for, or that they support a given policy offered by whatever the wrong political party is, you no longer trust them. You question not only their integrity, but their intentions. And not just in relation to the issue of disagreement, but moreover, in relation to everything. The truth is, there is no longer anything that can be said that has not been politicized by these one-eyed views. Whether it's Israel or immigration, security or asylum seekers, gender, violence, schools, race, class, economy, hunger. Just even the use of certain otherwise benign words. Each and all of them are now seen as code for one particular view of the world or another. Last year, I received a letter accusing me of, quote, complicity with Democrats for my use of the word bridge in a sermon, and another accusing me of complicity with Republicans for using the word wall in the very same sermon. These are absolutist, one-eyed views, and they are attitudes that have paralyzed us, forcing everyone's hand to a place that I must tell you does not lead anywhere that is good. I have preached before you so many times about the dangers of this siloed, like-minded blindness to which everyone on every possible side is succumbing. The one-eyed world is a problem because just like with my eye exam, with only one eye open, we mistake what should be the anchoring center instead for the opposite extreme, as we physically cannot see anything beyond it. We cannot see the other side. It is not there. But the thing is, it is there. And we will have to open both of our eyes should we prefer to stay on the upper end of the food chain. We might think we are safer in our reflective filter bubbles, where we are protected from the so-called evils of the other side's confrontation. But don't be fooled. Safe does not mean comfortable. It is the one-eyed world that is dangerous. That is the doorway to fanaticism. That is the doorway to dehumanization. That is what leads to violence and war. And that has no place in our Jewish faith, no less in this synagogue. Over and over again, Jewish sacred texts implore us not to fall victim to our baser desires of a one-eyed worldview. We need not look further than this morning's Torah portion, Nitzavim, in which God establishes the covenant with all the people for all time. The key text, Atem Nitzavim Hayom Kulchem. You stand this day, all of you, before the Lord your God, your tribal heads, your elders and your officials, your children, your wives, even the stranger within your midst, from the wood chopper to the water drawer, to enter into the covenant. Traditional commentaries wonder why all of you doesn't speak for itself, and why the text goes on to list each group by name. Ultimately, they conclude the groups are listed to demonstrate the incredible diversity of everyone who is considered a part of our people. The groups that are listed represent the most to the least powerful, as well as the most insiders to the most outsiders of the establishment. Even those who were not Jewish themselves, but who had thrown their lot in with the Jewish people are counted. When it comes to our Am Echad, our one Jewish people, we must remember that everybody counts, as the unity of the covenant is foundationally based on our diversity. So why is this important from a Jewish vantage? Because to make that vision of the prophet Isaiah, God's vision, manifest in this world, to fulfill our hopes for a world that is healed and whole, everyone will be needed to do the work. All viewpoints are required. After the Torah describes the complete and expansive inclusion of everyone from the periphery to the center, it offers this charge. It says literally, "See, I have set before you life and blessing, death and curse. Choose life to really live." We were called then, and we are called today to open both of our eyes, to see the choices in front of us, and then to choose blessing, so that we might together, every one of us, journey on a path of loving God and walking in God's ways. And it is those ways that are not the reserve of any singular political party or viewpoint. They are diverse and as expansive as the sands of the sea. The ironic twist of the one-eyed world is that while we might assume that what we are blinded to is the world of the other, the truth is we are blinded to ourselves, to our truths, to the depth of what is really behind what and why we believe what we do. When we open our other eye, we gain greater understanding not just of the other, but more importantly of ourselves. Remember the grandfather and grandson who had stopped speaking? After he recounted this conversation, I asked him why it was he felt so assured in his viewpoint. He said, "I guess it has to do with my experiences. I firmly believe that Israel has every right to do whatever she needs to do to defend herself. Of course, I don't like that Israel's hand has been forced. But what does the world expect Israel to do when everybody wants to destroy her?" I then asked if he felt his grandson had had similar experiences to his while growing up. To which he said, "Oh, of course not. Thankfully, my grandson grew up never experiencing any anti-Semitism and only knowing Israel as a strong, independent nation that proved just as established as any other country." So I asked him if he thought he could, just for a moment, understand how his grandson could come to see Israel as he did. And did that then make him anti-Zionist, or just a different kind of Zionist? Finally, I asked if he thought he could engage his grandson in a conversation, inviting him into the very same questions. Could he ask his grandson to visualize himself in his grandfather's shoes and imagine how he would see Israel if he were him? Not for the purpose of changing the other's mind, but rather for the purpose of expanding their fields of view to include the possibility of each other's sightline. Could an invitation for each to open the other eye enable them to see each other once again, no longer separated on the far sides of the periphery, but rather both now under the same wide and open tent? There's a strange ritual in the Torah for the treatment of one who has contracted an illness called tzara'at, said to manifest when one spoke lashon hara, or falsehoods, about another person. The illness was considered incredibly dangerous as it was highly contagious, and as such, upon receiving a diagnosis, the afflicted person was sent outside the gates of the town, essentially in a quarantine. Once there, they were to stand at the gates and tell any passerby that they had sara'at by yelling out to them, "Tameh, tameh, I am impure," presumably so that the passerby would know not to get too close, so as not to put themselves in danger. But the Talmud offers an interesting twist. In addition to a public health warning, it suggests a second purpose for the call of the afflicted, so as to, quote, inform the public of his misfortune, so that the public will beg on his behalf for mercy. Thus, the cry of Tameh, Tameh is not intended to alert the passerby to the existence of illness alone, but also to arouse their sympathy for the afflicted person. Put together, the ritual causes each person, both the afflicted and the passerby, to actually see the other, not through a singular lens of fear or repulsion, but rather through a lens of empathy, for the afflicted to be put in a position of caring for the condition of the passerby, and the passerby to be put in a position of caring for the condition of the afflicted. The truth is, until we are willing to truly open our eyes and expand our fields of view to include those we have otherwise blocked, we will remain in the stalemate of impotence that has led to our current national paralysis. Let me be clear. It's my way or the highway leads to the highway every time. It's only when each of us opens both of our eyes that we will find the ways to solve the problems that not only divide us now, but prove the truest threats to our lives, our people, our country, and our planet. So on this Yom Kippur, this day of looking within, let us gaze deeply to ask and answer the hard questions. Am I inadvertently or consciously closing one of my eyes? Am I strong enough to open it, to see in full view that to which I have willfully blinded myself up until now? And what commitments am I willing to make to assure that I keep both eyes open in this new year? Remember that whole thing about binocular vision and how it proves a key component of our ability to survive? Of note is that Darwin never actually wrote about survival of the fittest. That was Herbert Spencer. Instead, Darwin's key theory, called the sympathy hypothesis, would be better named survival of the kindest. In his research, Darwin concluded, those communities which included the greatest number of the most sympathetic members would flourish best. So Darwin didn't advocate brute strength or the "if you're not with us, you're against us" mentality as the indicator for a community's advancement or evolution, but rather, he suggested that societal longevity rested with how sympathetic, how kind, and how compassionate its members were. Were they able to see the world from each other's view, to feel pulled and connected to each other? Without kindness and compassion, our survival and flourishing would have been unlikely. It is, in fact, only when we really see each other that we merit our place at the top of all of the other species over whom we preside. In Judaism, we do not get to see what God looks like. But our tradition teaches that when we gaze into each other's eyes, widely, fully, It is there that we can see the face of God. May it be so in our day. Gemar Chatima Tova. May we be inscribed and sealed for kindness, for clarity, and for goodness in this new year.